The system that was supposed to save them. July 12th, 1944. Wichita, Kansas. The pre-dawn sky over the sprawling Boeing Plant No. 1 glowed a dull industrial orange, lit by the furnace-like heat trapped in its hangars. Rows of unfinished B-29 Superfortresses stretched out like metallic leviathans, their gleaming fuselages sweating condensation in the warm night air. The war in the Pacific had become a brutal mathematics of distance, fuel, and firepower. And these machines were America's wager, the only aircraft capable of carrying a city-crushing payload across oceans. But in this hour, before the factory whistle blew and the workforce flooded in, they were silent giants with a secret problem. Inside Hangar 9, a mechanic flipped a circuit breaker. A low electric hum rolled across the concrete floor. Then another sound rose from the heart of a B-29 fuselage, a soft whirring, escalating into a high-pitched, mechanical crescendo. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The central fire control system was waking up. 4 hemispherical turrets, 2 above, 2 below, rotated in slow, deliberate arcs. Their twin 50 caliber barrels tracked across the hangar like the eyes of a waking predator. Sight blisters on the fuselage lit up as gyro-stabilized computing sites powered on, their motorized mechanisms chirping and whining. Servo amplifiers inside the belly of the plane shuddered with power. Everything looked perfect, but it wasn't. A crackling sound, faint but unmistakable, snapped through the turret cabling. The upper forward turret twitched, then it jerked violently, swung past its stop, and slammed into its arc limit with a metallic thud. The mechanic swore and stepped back. The turret kept turning, grinding against its stop until smoke puffed from the base. Another fire control amplifier had burned out. Again, the system that was supposed to protect an entire crew at 30,000 feet was failing on the ground in Kansas. At 4:11 a.m., 40 miles across the state line in a small, sweltering room at the Hotel Eaton in downtown Kansas City, a telephone rang. Vinnie Gornick, 26 years old, slight, bespectacled, and an unlikely member of the B-29 war effort, jolted awake. He pushed aside a stack of paper schematics that had slid onto his blanket during the night. Amplifier diagrams, turret feedback loops, cooling channel sketches. He'd fallen asleep tracing wiring faults again. He answered the phone. "Gornick, this is Captain Ellsworth. We've got another one." Vinnie rubbed his eyes. Upper forward turret, all 4. That woke him fully. "All 4 turrets burned out?" "No," the captain replied grimly. "All 4 have drift error beyond test limits, and 1 burned out, again. We need you in Wichita immediately." There was a pause on the line. "Then, we fly to the Marianas in 3 weeks. If this isn't fixed before then, those boys are going unprotected." Vinnie closed his eyes. He knew what that meant. A 10-man B-29 crew flying 1,500 miles over open ocean into Japanese fighter swarms with nothing but deadweight turrets. He sat up, heart pounding. "I'll be there before sunrise." As the first streaks of daylight broke across Kansas, Gornick arrived at the Boeing plant, badge clipped to his sweat-dampened shirt. The hangars were already buzzing with activity, riveters hammering, cranes groaning, sparks falling like golden rain from welders perched inside engine nacelles. But Hangar 9 was different, quiet, tense. Inside, a cluster of Air Force officers, Boeing supervisors, and GE engineers circled the B-29 with clipboards and grim expressions. Captain Ellsworth approached him. "You're the last engineer we have who's actually fixed one of these in the field." Vinnie nodded, unsnapped his tool bag, and ducked into the aircraft's belly. A wave of heat hit him. The B-29's central tunnel felt like a boiler room, even with no engines running. Heat from the Kansas summer soaked into metal ribs, distorting sensitive fire control components that GE's designers had never tested in environments like this. He crawled to the amplifier bay. 6 black metal boxes sat mounted in a steel rack. Servo amplifiers, computing amplifiers, and the dual-channel power inverter that fed them. The smell of scorched insulation hung in the air. Vinny reached out. The amplifier casing was still warm. Too warm. "Doesn't make sense," muttered a Boeing technician beside him. "Yesterday we let her sit for 6 hours before this test. Everything should have been cool." Vinny shook his head. "No, the problem isn't heat buildup, it's heat soak." The technician blinked. "What's the difference?" Vinny pulled a small jeweler's screwdriver from his pocket and pried open the amplifier panel. "The metal structure of this aircraft stores heat like a furnace. Even when the air cools, the frame stays hot. That heat transfers directly into the amplifiers. They're drifting because their reference circuits are changing value. And when they drift," he tapped a scorched resistor, "they overshoot, surge the turret motors, and we get burnouts." The technician stared at him. "So, the hotter the fuselage, the dumber the computer?" "Exactly. And on a Pacific Island runway, in 98-degree heat, those amplifiers wouldn't just drift. They'd fail completely." Ellsworth leaned into the fuselage. "You think this is solvable?" "Yes," Vinny answered, without hesitation. "No," he added under his breath. The truth was cruel. GE's amplifiers had been designed in climate-controlled labs. The B-29's long missions would expose them to brutal temperatures, vibration, dust, and oxygen-starved high-altitude air, none of which the original fire control team had tested. Fixing this meant redesigning the amplifier's thermal compensation network, rebalancing the servo feedback loops, strengthening turret limit, switch timing, and implementing a new airflow pathway inside the amplifier bay. All in 72 hours. Ellsworth spoke quietly. "The General wants the first squadron flying to Saipan in 3 weeks. If your system fails in combat, we're not just losing planes, we're losing the war's only strategic bombing weapon." Vinny closed his eyes, feeling the pressure land, like a weight, across his shoulders. "I'll fix it," he said at last. "But I need full access, all day, all night. I don't care who I have to wake up." Ellsworth nodded. "You'll have it." Climbing into the upper forward turret was like stepping inside the moving part of a battleship gun director. The dome's interior was a cramped tangle of servo motors, gear trains, feedback potentiometers, and cooling ducts. Vinny squeezed inside, knees pressed against metal plating. He powered the turret manually. The rotation motor hummed, smooth, stable. He pressed the elevation control. The turret jerked upward, hesitated, then lurched another 2 degrees too far. "Damn it," he whispered. He removed the elevation amplifier cover. The feedback potentiometer rod was misaligned, not by much, maybe 0.5 millimeter, but at high temperature, that misalignment translated into signal drift, incorrect angular feedback, runaway correction loops, and catastrophic overshoot. He pulled a pocket notebook from his shirt and scrolled a number. 0.53, minute drift at 42 degrees C, unacceptable, deadly. The turret suddenly stopped responding. He smelled ozone. Another amplifier had burned out. He climbed out, hands shaking, sweat dripping from his face. Ellsworth approached. "What do you think?" Vinny wiped his hands on his shirt. "I think the Japanese Zero won't have to shoot down B-29s. Our turrets will kill the crews first." At midnight, Hangar 9 was a cathedral of echoing footsteps and humming machinery. The overhead lights cast long shadows across the B-29's polished skin. Vinny worked alone inside the nose blister, surrounded by sighting mechanisms, humming with power. He recalibrated amplifiers, swapped resistors, adjusted drift compensators, and tested servo behavior across temperature ranges. At 2:17 a.m., he recorded breakthrough. Thermal drift compensator. New resistor bridge configuration. Stabilizes output at plus 1.6 joules under full heat load. He allowed himself a thin smile. Then the turret behind him shuddered and died. Failure. Again. He slammed a fist against the metal bulkhead. Everything he fixed revealed a deeper flaw. Every flaw revealed a design oversight no one had seen coming. This wasn't one problem. It was a chain reaction, and he had 48 hours left. By midday, the next day, generals had arrived, several of them. Engineers from Wright Field, too, and silence fell when they entered Hangar 9 and saw the young GE engineer lying on his back under the amplifier rack, sleeves rolled up, shirt soaked through with sweat and grease. "Is this the man responsible for the redesign?" General Doolin asked. Vinny looked up, blinking through exhaustion. "Yes, sir." "You look like hell." "Yes, sir." "You going to fix my turrets?" Vinny stood, wiped his hands on his pants, and forced himself to speak clearly, despite his trembling. "Yes, sir. But I need you to understand something." The general raised an eyebrow. "This system was never meant for heat like this, vibration like this, or mission durations like this. We didn't anticipate the Pacific. We didn't anticipate 20-hour flights. We didn't anticipate Japan." The general stared at him. "Son, nobody anticipated Japan." For the first time, Vinny felt they understood the stakes. At 3:58 a.m., after nearly 2 days without sleep, the breakthrough came. Vinny had been staring at a melted section of insulation when a realization hit him so abruptly he whispered the word aloud. Airflow. The amplifiers weren't just overheating from ambient heat, they were suffocating. There was no ventilation inside the amplifier bay. None. The airflow paths were blocked by wiring bundles that shifted during assembly. Hot air was being trapped around the amplifiers, multiplying drift. He grabbed a flashlight, dove inside with wire cutters, and began rerouting cable harnesses by hand. With each harness moved, new air channels opened. Cold air in, hot air out. He installed a temporary test duct and powered the amplifiers. For the first time, drift dropped to near zero. He connected the turret controls, heart racing. The turret rotated. Smooth, precise, stable, no overshoot, no runaway, no burnouts. Vinny slumped against the fuselage wall, unable to keep his eyes open. He'd done it. A full redesign of airflow, thermal compensation, and amplifier feedback in under 60 hours. The 72-hour clock hadn't run out yet, but he had. Darkness closed in as he finally passed out from exhaustion. He woke on a cot someone had dragged into the hangar. It was noon. A crowd had formed around the B-29. The first full heat test was about to begin. Technicians loaded the plane with heaters to simulate Mariana's temperatures. Officers hovered nervously. The general stood with arms folded. Vinny pushed himself to his feet. He staggered toward the aircraft. Ellsworth caught him. "Easy. You look like you slept 4 minutes." 14, Vinny corrected. "You sure you're ready?" "No." But he climbed inside anyway. The test began. Heat rose. Temperature climbed past 100 degrees, then 110, then 120. The amplifiers stabilized. The servos held steady. Turrets moved like silk. No overshoot, no drift, no burnouts, no smoke. At 126 GF, the system remained rock solid. The general stepped forward. "Gornick," he said, softly. "You just saved my cruise." Vinny nodded weakly. "Just doing my job, sir." He swayed, and Ellsworth grabbed his arm. "Get this man a bed!" The general barked. And for the first time in 3 days, the engineer who saved the B-29's life finally slept. July 28th, 1944. Northfield, Saipan. The sky above the newly carved airstrip shimmered with heat. The Mariana's sun beat down mercilessly on the coral dust, turning it into a white haze that clung to every surface. Uniforms, rivets, oxygen hoses, turret glass, everything. B-29s lined the field like silver islands, their massive wings stretching across the horizon. Mechanics and gunners moved around them with a mixture of exhaustion and awe. The men had never seen anything like the Superfortress before. And deep inside, the first of those newly arrived giants was a machine they understood even less. The General Electric Central Fire Control System, fresh off Vinny Gornick's 72-hour miracle in Wichita. It was the most advanced aerial weapon ever installed in a bomber. But this was its first true test, and tests on Saipan had a habit of turning into funerals. 16 days after the crisis in Wichita, a C-47 descended onto the airstrip carrying crates of revised amplifier units and one exhausted, but restless man. Vinnie Gornick. The Pacific air hit him like a wall of steam as he stepped onto the tarmac. Even through his fatigue, the smell of jet fuel, wet coral, and ocean wind told him immediately Kansas hadn't prepared him for this. Captain Ellsworth was already waiting for him by a jeep. "You look alive," Ellsworth said, which for him was high praise. "I slept for 10 days straight," Vinnie muttered. "That was 3 days ago. Time to go back to work." Vinnie climbed into the jeep. As they drove toward the row of B-29s, shimmering in the heat, he felt his chest tighten. He hadn't expected to be here. At the front, engineers didn't go to war zones unless something was very wrong. "How many CFC failures since you arrived?" he asked. Ellsworth's jaw clenched. 2 turrets locked up. 1 gunner nearly lost a finger clearing a jam. 1 drift error so bad the guns pointed 40 degrees off target. Vinnie felt the weight return to his shoulders. "How hot inside the amplifier bays?" "Up to 140 degrees. That was worse than Kansas. Worse than Wichita's furnace-like hangars. Worse than any test he had simulated. "Show me the worst one," Vinnie said. Sergeant Larry Deacon, top gunner of the 73rd Bomb Wing, was pacing beside his aircraft nicknamed Southern Belle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing sunglasses, and a look of profound skepticism. His flight jacket hung open in the tropical heat, revealing a chain with a tiny silver cross. "Heard a wizard from GE fixed our turrets," Deacon said, when Vinnie approached. Vinnie blinked. "Eh? Wizard? That's what the boys are calling you. Figure if you can stop these things from burning out every time we breathe on them. You're either a wizard or lying." Ellsworth stepped forward sharply. Deacon. "No, it's all right," Vinnie interrupted. "I'd be skeptical too." Deacon crossed his arms. "We had a drift error yesterday so bad that I was aiming at the Pacific and the belly turret was tracking a palm tree." Vinnie nodded. "Let me see it." They pulled open the amplifier bay. The blast of hot air was overwhelming. Vinnie coughed and covered his nose with his sleeve. "How long since this plane flew?" he asked. Deacon checked his watch. 5 hours. Not long enough for the metal to cool. The temperature inside the bay was still brutal, and the amplifiers were heating themselves on top of it. Vinnie crawled inside. His shirt was soaked instantly. He felt around the wiring harnesses, still where he expected them. Good. He checked airflow ducts. Still clear. He checked the amplifier mounts. One mount screw was loose, vibrating under heat and flight loads. He looked up at Deacon. "We'll fix this. Give me an hour." The gunner didn't look convinced. "Wizard, miracle worker, or liar," Deacon muttered. "We'll find out tomorrow." At 1700 hours, a cluster of B-29 crews assembled in a tent lit by lanterns. Sweat ran down faces. Even as the sun dropped behind volcanic ridges, maps lined the walls. Tokyo, Iwo Jima, Nagoya, Truk. The next mission was posted on a chalkboard. Primary target: Shortland Naval Base, Ististes, fighter. Intercept: highest E-flak, moderate est, CFC reliability, unknown. At that last line, murmurs started. Colonel Saunders stepped onto the platform. "All right, listen up. We've got a guest. This is V. Gornick from General Electric. He's the man responsible for the revised fire control amplifiers." Someone in the back shouted, "Then tell him to make the damn things stop frying themselves." Laughter rippled through the room. But bitter, tired laughter. Vinnie stepped forward. "This system," he said quietly, "has never been flown in conditions like Saipan." Silence fell. The heat, the humidity, the vibration, it pushes everything past what we designed for. Saunders scowled. "That's not reassuring, son." "It's reality," Vinnie said calmly. "And reality is this. The new amplifier configuration has passed every test we've thrown at it, but tomorrow is its first combat leg." A gunner raised his hand. "Will the turrets stay synced?" "Yes." Another. "Will drift stay within tolerance?" "Yes." A navigator frowned. "What's tolerance to you, son?" Under 2.5 degrees. The room murmured again. Deacon raised his hand. What if heat spikes past 130? Vinny swallowed. That's where we're still learning. The colonel stepped forward. All right, that's enough. Crews gear up at 0400, dismissed. As the men filed out, Deacon approached. Vinny, you seem honest, he said. That's rare these days. Vinny shrugged. I don't want to lie to men going to war. Deacon put a hand on his shoulder. Then make damn sure those turrets work tomorrow. July 29th, 1944. 330 hours. The air was thick with humidity as crews strapped in. Engines coughed to life one by one, sending vibrations through the ground like distant artillery. The sky was still black, a canopy of stars shining over the Pacific. Vinny stood inside the armor blister of Southern Bell, watching the computing site warm up. He had a headset plugged into the intercom, but said nothing. Deacon climbed into the top gunner's seat. You flying with us? He asked. No. Engineers aren't allowed on combat missions. Shame, Deacon said. Would have been nice to have you babysit these things. But there was no sarcasm in his voice anymore. The pre-flight test began. Upper turret. Rotate. Smooth. Lower turret, rotate. Smooth. Side blisters, tracking. Smooth, good, very good. CFC synchronization, check. All 4 turrets aligned on an imaginary target above the horizon. No drift, no lag, no overshoot. Deacon exhaled slowly. Looks good, wizard. The engines roared to full power. The plane lurched forward. Vinny stepped back, shielding his face from prop blast. One by one, the B-29s accelerated down the runway and lifted into the night. He watched until the last one faded into darkness. Then he went to the radio tent, and he waited. At 0920 hours, 1,700 miles from Saipan, the formation neared Shortland Harbor. Clouds broke apart, revealing a sapphire sea dotted with reefs and the faint outline of Japanese ships below. Then the warning crackled over radio. Bandits, bandits, 11 o'clock high. Vinny froze. Ellsworth grabbed the handset. Which squadron? No answer. Only the roar of engines and the frantic calls of gunners engaging targets. Inside Southern Bell, Deacon yanked his computing site into action. The top turret swiveled with the grace of a dancer, locking onto a glint of sunlight approaching fast. A Mitsubishi A6M0. Tracking at 300 yards, Deacon barked. Lead angle computed. Firing. Twin 50s thundered overhead, sending brass casings clattering across the fuselage. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. In the belly turret, Corporal Hughes tracked another Zero, diving from below. Tracking, firing. The guns responded instantly. No lag, no drift. The revised amplifiers were holding. But then something happened that none of them expected. 3 Zeros attacked simultaneously from different angles. The top turret locked onto one. The belly turret locked onto another. The right blister locked onto the third. And yet, all 3 gunners saw their guns move in perfect coordination, tracking different targets without wires crossing, without confusion, without failure. The system was performing exactly as GE had promised 2 years earlier. For the first time in combat, it was finally real. Deacon squeezed his sight grips. The turret elevated smoothly. The Zero filled his reticle. Come on. Come on. He fired. The fighter burst into flame and spiraled downward. Got him, Deacon yelled. Another gunner shouted from the intercom. Holy hell, the system actually works. Another Zero swept in from the rear. The tail gunner engaged. Target at 6 o'clock. Tracking steady, no drift. A burst of 50 caliber tracers lit the sky. The Zero exploded. The radio tent on Saipan erupted in cheers. Vinny leaned forward, gripping the headset so tightly his knuckles whitened. They weren't just surviving. They were winning. At 09:54, just as the formation began its bombing run, disaster struck. A panicked voice cracked over the intercom. Lower turret dead. I'm blind down here, controls unresponsive. Vinny's heart dropped. What's happening? He demanded. Ellsworth pointed at the radio operator. Patch him through. Hughes, Vinny said into the mic. Tell me exactly what happened. It just froze. No movement, no sound. Vinny closed his eyes, visualizing the amplifier bay. If the lower turret amplifier was dead, the entire gun system was compromised. Temperature reading? He asked. Feels like a stove down here, Vinny swore softly. A thermal spike. The airflow design might not be enough in Pacific combat heat. The plane was entering flak range. They needed that turret operational. Try switching to emergency bypass, Vinny said. Already tried, no response. A zero dove underneath the formation. The lower turret was the only one that could stop it. Hughes screamed into the mic. Someone's got to cover low 6. I'm blind. The Zero opened fire. 30 caliber rounds stitched across the bomber's underside. Deacon shouted, Hughes, hang on. But the Zero was coming around for another pass. The belly turret remained dead, and then Hughes roared, It's alive, turret responding, tracking, firing. The system snapped back to life, as if nothing had happened. The turret fired a long burst. The Zero blew apart. The crew erupted in cheers. Vinny didn't cheer. He stood frozen, heart pounding. The system had failed, then spontaneously revived. He knew enough about such behavior to understand what that meant. This was not a simple overheating issue. It was worse. Somewhere inside that aircraft, a failure was waiting to kill an entire crew, and the next time it might not revive. The B-29s returned at dusk, engines sputtering, holes punched through wings and fuselage. Ground crews raced to guide them in. Vinny stood at the edge of the airstrip as Southern Belle taxied back. Deacon climbed out, alive, but trembling from adrenaline. You were listening in? He asked. Yes, Vinny whispered. What the hell happened to my belly turret? Vinny swallowed hard. I don't know yet. That Zero almost tore us apart, Deacon said quietly. But the moment that turret came back online, it felt like your system saved all of us. Vinny nodded slowly. It did. And it didn't. At 21:30 hours, with the sun finally gone and the airstrip quieting down, Vinny entered the amplifier bay with a thermometer and flashlight. He touched the casing of Hughes's lower turret amplifier. It was cool. Too cool. It should have been hot from the mission. He checked the airflow ducts. Clear. He checked wiring bundles. Stable. He checked mounts. Firm. That made no sense. And then, as he adjusted a cable bundle with 2 fingers, the amplifier flickered. Just once. But he saw it. A tiny spark. A momentary break in contact. A microscopic opening in a connector pin caused by vibration. Not electrical burnout. Not thermal collapse. Not amplifier failure. A vibration-induced micro-disconnect. It could freeze a turret, kill a crew, then reseat itself seconds later, acting like nothing happened. Vinny stared at the connector, stunned. Then he whispered the words, Oh no, this isn't a design flaw, this a manufacturing flaw. A fixable one. But only if he redesigned the connector. Every connector. In the entire CFC system. He exhaled, rubbing his eyes. The system hadn't just gone to war, it had taught him the next fatal weakness. One he had to fix. Fast. July 30th, 1944. 02 to 20 hours. Northfield, Saipan. The airfield was silent except for the faint hiss of the Pacific wind and the constant ghost-like creak of cooling metal from an entire squadron of B-29s asleep on the tarmac. Their silver skins glinted under a thin moon, pockmarked with bullet holes and flecked with coral dust. To most men on the island, these machines were done for the night. To one man, the night had only just begun. Inside, a maintenance tent lit by a single swaying bulb, Vinny Gornick sat hunched over a disassembled amplifier, screws and sockets scattered across the table like debris from an autopsy. He stared at the tiny connector pin, the one he'd seen flicker, the one that had nearly killed the entire Southern Belle crew. A vibration-induced micro-disconnect. That was the enemy. Not Japan, not Zeros, not flak. A microscopic gap in a connector pin, less than the thickness of an eyelash, was enough to freeze an entire turret, and the same flaw existed in every B-29 on Saipan. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling how badly it shook. He knew what came next. Redesign the connector, redesign all of them, convince the Air Force to ground the entire squadron, or at least every aircraft using the first-run GE connectors, if the brass agreed, if they believed him, if they had time. He checked his watch. 2:21. 13 hours remained until the next combat mission. Colonel Saunders was not a man who liked engineers appearing at bivouac tents at 2:30 in the morning. He stepped out in olive shorts, boots unlaced, chest bare, dog tag swinging. His face looked carved from old driftwood, dark, deep-lined, hard. "This better be important," he growled. "It is," Vinny said. Saunders folded his arms. "What's wrong with my turrets now? One connector pin, maybe thousands of them." Vinny held up the tiny component between tweezers. "This little thing can cut power to any turret at any time. Heat plus 30 Gs of vibration, and the pin pulls back just enough to break contact." Saunders snorted. "Then stop it from doing that." "I can, but every CFC unit in theater needs to be opened up. Every pin replaced or reinforced. If we don't—" He hesitated. "What?" Saunders demanded. "One day a turret will fail and won't come back, and the next Zero that makes a pass won't miss." The tent fell silent except for the distant rumble of generators. Saunders stepped closer. "You want me to ground a whole bomb group?" he said quietly. "Because of a pin?" Vinny steadied his breath. "Yes." Saunders stared at him for a long time. Then he shook his head. "Not happening. We fly in 13 hours. Colonel, if we don't fix this—" "No, son." Saunders jabbed a finger into Vinny's chest. "You don't understand what's at stake. We ground these planes, Tokyo sends 50 more destroyers south, Marines die, Army boys die, Navy boys die." He leaned in. "And I'm not grounding a fighting wing because one engineer sees ghosts in a connector." Vinny opened his mouth to argue. Then something happened he didn't expect. A calm voice spoke behind them. "Ground them?" Both men turned. Captain Ellsworth stood in the moonlight, hands in his pockets, eyes deadly serious. "Colonel," Ellsworth said, "I watched that lower turret die yesterday. It froze for 20 seconds. If it had stayed dead, Southern Belle was gone." Saunders rubbed his temples. "You're telling me my entire defensive system, my $1 million GE wonder weapon, can be killed by a part smaller than a match head?" "Yes," Vinny said. "And you can fix it?" Saunders asked, tone suddenly sharp. "Yes." "How long?" Vinny swallowed hard. "That depends on how many mechanics you can give me." Saunders sighed, defeated. "Fine. I'll give you the entire maintenance battalion." He paused. "But you have until 1300 hours tomorrow. At 1400, we fly." Vinny stared at him. "That's not enough time." Saunders nodded grimly. "I know." By 0300, the airbase was awake again, not because of Japanese bombers or alarms, but because word had spread. GE's wizard says a connector might kill us. We're grounded until sunrise. He's redesigning the whole damn system. Over 100 mechanics converged on the maintenance tent. Electricians, turret specialists, radio technicians, men with grease under their fingernails and exhaustion in their eyes. They waited for instruction. Vinny stepped onto an overturned ammo crate. He was terrified, but every man watched him in silence. He held up the connector pin. "This part," he said, "is why the belly turret died yesterday. Not heat, not drift, not power." He took a breath. "This connector loses contact under vibration. Your planes vibrate harder than anything we tested in the States." "Can we fix it?" someone called out. "Yes," Vinny said, "but we have to modify every amplifier harness, every one." A murmur passed through the men. Vinny continued. "We reinforce each connector, add a locking crimp, reseat the pin, insulate the bundle, then secure the harness to eliminate movement." Another man seized a hand. "How long will it take?" Vinny hesitated. Then Deacons stepped forward from the crowd. As long as it damn well needs, the gunner growled. Because I'm not flying tomorrow with a blind belly turret. The crowd murmured again, this time with energy. Resolve, Ellsworth whispered. You've got them. Vinny nodded. All right, he said. Divide into teams of 8. Every team takes one aircraft, work from nose to tail. When you finish, you help the next team. A corporal saluted. And you, sir? Vinny held up his sleeves. I'm rewiring every CFC amplifier on Southern Bell. By dawn, the airstrip roared with activity. Maintenance pits opened, panels dropped, amplifier bays lit up with flashlights and portable lamps. Men crawled through fuselages, some elbow-deep in servos, others threading new insulation around cable bundles. The temperature climbed. 90 degrees, 95, 100. Sweat dripped from faces onto circuit boards. Mechanics cursed as amplifier screws rolled into darkness. A sergeant burned his forearm on a hot inverter case. Another sliced his knuckle on a turret gear tooth. No one stopped. Inside, Southern Bell. Vinny lay on his stomach across the central tunnel, both arms buried in wiring. He had 4 connector harnesses left. Ellsworth knelt behind him. You're shaking. Low blood sugar, Vinny muttered. When did you last eat? 2 days ago. Ellsworth shoved a ration bar between his teeth. Stop dying and finish the job. Vinny chewed without looking up. At 11:30 hours, 7.5 hours before mission time, the first B-29 rolled out for a CFC functionality test. It was Southern Bell. Vinny stood beneath the aircraft, hands trembling, clothes soaked with sweat and grime. Deacon sat in the top gunner seat, headset pressed to his ear. The Colonel Saunders observed from the shade of a tent, arms folded. Powering CFC, Deacon said. Amplifiers hummed to life. Turrets rotated. Elevation servos glided upward. No stutters. Synchronization test, Deacon said. All 4 turrets aligned. Perfectly. Temperature? Vinny called out. Internal reading, 118 degrees. A good test temperature. Tough, but realistic. All right, Deacon said. Switching to rapid slew. The turret snapped left, then right, then up. No overshoot, no drift, no pause. Finally, Deacon performed the most violent maneuver, track slam, a rapid full rotation halt. The turret whipped around, then jerked to a dead stop without hesitation. The crowd held its breath. Deacon's voice crackled over the intercom. Ah, holy hell. Vinny stared up. It worked. It really worked. And then Deacon spoke again louder. This is smoother than yesterday, smoother than Kansas, smoother than any CFC I've ever touched. The crowd erupted in cheers. Colonel Saunders approached Vinny. He did not smile. He did not congratulate him. But he said the one sentence Vinny needed to hear. You bought us a chance. But then came the problem. Aircraft 247, Honeymoon Harry, failed its test. The upper forward turret drifted 6 degrees right, then froze, then jumped left, then died completely. The crew stared. The mechanics cursed. Vinny sprinted across the tarmac. Inside the bay, he tore open the amplifier harness, then he froze. The connector pin was modified. The crimp was correct. The insulation was correct. But one thing wasn't. A hairline crack ran along the mounting bracket, a structural defect that caused the amplifier to vibrate against its mount even after reinforcement. Not his flaw. Not GE's. A Boeing assembly flaw. He stood up as Saunders faced him. Well, the colonel snapped. It's not us, Vinny said. Amplifier mount is cracked. Turret took too much stress on landing. We need to replace the mount. How long? 30 minutes. Ellsworth nodded. You heard him. Move. Mechanics swarmed the aircraft. Rivets flew. Screws clattered. A new mount slid into place. At 12:54 hours, 6 minutes before mission time, the turret whirred to life. Smooth, stable, perfect. Vinny nearly collapsed from relief. Saunders clapped him on the shoulder. Go get some water, son. You look like a ghost. At 1400 hours sharp, the engines of an entire B-29 wing roared to life. Dust billowed behind them. Turrets swiveled in readiness, like metallic eyes scanning the horizon. Deacon stuck his head out of the top blister. He shouted down, "Wizard! If I come back alive, I owe you a beer." Vinny grinned weakly. "You owe me a brewery." The planes taxied. One after another, they lifted into the sky. Vinny stood alone on the airstrip, the Pacific wind blowing across his face. He had done everything he could. Now, the aircraft and his work were going to war over the Philippine Sea, 17 hours. The CFC system behaved like a creature reborn. 30 zeros rose to meet the formation. Deacon locked onto one. Tracking smooth, predictor steady, lead angle correct, boom! The zero erupted in flame. Another approach from low 6. Hughes tracked it. No pause, no hesitation, no micro disconnect. Boom! The fighter fell away, trailing smoke. A third swept in from the right blister. The system cross-synced beautifully. 4 independent gunners, 4 turrets, 4 targets, no conflicts. Boom! The radio operator shouted, "This is the cleanest run we've ever flown." And in the radio tent on Saipan, Vinny heard something he never expected. Laughter. Real laughter. The sound of men realizing they might not die today. Just as the formation completed its bombing run, a lone zero dove vertically from above, an angle most gunners hadn't trained for. Deacon spun upward. "Target 12 o'clock high, tracking fast." The zero accelerated straight down the chimney, aiming to spear the cockpit. Deacon fired a burst. Missed. He fired again. Missed again. The fighter kept coming. 15 seconds. 10, 7. Deacon muttered, "Come on, baby. Hold." The computing site adjusted lead angle, compensating for closure rate and altitude differential. The turret snapped upward faster than ever before. "Tracking, firing!" The barrels roared. The zero disintegrated mid-air, debris raining across the bomber's nose. The crew cheered, and Vinny collapsed into a chair in the radio tent, hands covering his face, tears mixing with sweat. It was over. It worked. His system, his impossible, barely held-together miracle, had survived the hardest test of all: combat. That evening, the B-29s landed on Saipan, battered, scorched, and riddled with holes. But alive. All alive. Not a single turret failure. Not one. The colonel approached Vinny. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Vinny shook his head. "You owe me a shower." Saunders laughed. A short, sharp sound. "You just saved a wing," he said. "The engineers back in the States will hear about this. Maybe even Washington." Vinny slumped onto a crate, every muscle screaming. For the first time since Kansas, he let himself breathe. He had come to the Pacific to fix a machine. But in fixing it, he had saved men. Real men, men with names and wives and futures. He looked at the sky, where the last red streaks of sunset faded into darkness. Then he whispered, "All right, what's next?" "Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us."